Evolution. It's not a scientific law or a law of biology. A scientific law must be 100% correct. Failure to meet only one challenge proves the law is wrong. This video will prove that the theory of evolution fails many challenges, not simply one.
So before we get started, I wanted to correct something I said in the last video. I said that evolution was not a fact, and that was based on the point that I was trying to make the conclusion that anything in science is not 100% guaranteed, because that is true. Nothing in science is 100% verifiable. Nothing is absolutely known. But in the definition used in science, evolution is a fact. And the way I was applying it is to general term of fact, like the sun is yellow. Or technically it's not, but it's actually white, but that's not the point. But I can move my hand. That is a fact, okay? I was applying it to the general use and not the scientific term. So, I want to make that correction. But, we can already say off and starting off that this guy is absolutely wrong. Of course, we knew that evolution was not a law, and he already made the claim that it was stated as a law. Law is entirely separate from a theory. A theory has a bunch of hypotheses, and they are tested over and over, that back up this claim. And this claim can make predictions. And it can make predictions that lead to more hypotheses, and then they again prove that theory, and it goes on and on and on. A law is, according to the definition, a statement based on repeated experimental observations that describe some phenomenon of nature. So usually it's a mathematical proof describing how fast I can tell you with a mathematical equation how fast an apple will fall. So. And it's usually over and over repeatable and guaranteed that this law will back us up at any time. So, we already knew this. It's not a law. But, and he continues to say, but yes, he's right about one thing. If something disproved a theory, you'd go back and if something disproved it, it would not be a theory anymore. If something disproved the law, it would not be a law anymore. So, he's on that point. So let's get.
The theory of evolution will never become a law of science because it has many errors. This is why it is still called a theory. The process of natural selection is not an evolutionary process.
So, we can see here that, like many who aren't well known or into science, have a misunderstanding of the meaning of theory compared to general usage of the term. So, let's go ahead and read the definition. A scientific theory is a well-substantiated explanation of some aspect of the natural world, based on the body of facts that have been repeatedly confirmed through observation and experiment. Such fact-supported theories are not guesses, but reliable accounts of the real world. So, there is a huge misunderstanding, and when you come into that, and you look into evolutionary theory, you're already kind of, and you believe creation, it's already thrown you off that it's just a random guess about the natural world around us. Well, keep in mind there is also gravity theory, that is the actual term for it, and there is germ theory. So, keep that in mind. And he also says at the end that natural selection is not the process of evolution. Prove it. But let's continue with what he has to say.
DNA proves that evolution is false. The DNA implants on animals allow selective breeding to achieve desired results. Dogs are a good example of selective breeding. The DNA in all dogs has many recessive traits. A desired trait can be produced in dogs by selecting dogs with a particular trait to produce offspring with that trait. This specialized selective breeding can continue for generation after generation until a breed of dog is developed. Many different types of dogs can be developed this way, but they can never develop a cat by selective breeding dogs.
So, yes, we can breed dogs and other animals, and even plants, to acquire huge changes over time. Look at the banana, of course. If you look at the original banana, there's this video with, I can't remember his name, but he's saying that the banana is actually the perfect example of God's creation on how it's bent and all that. But if you actually look, the banana looked wildly different around 2,000 years ago. It was an entirely, it was breeded, it was naturally, it was breeded, technically, to have characteristics that we liked, and it made it better for humans to eat. It had appealing, that easier to access. But yes, over these huge amount of times, we can create huge changes in whatever organism we'd like through selective breeding. But these changes that we create, who's to tell you that in a natural environment that they were to stop? What force causes at a certain point that over these millions of years that which the timeline takes place? I know you probably believe that it's in a 6,000 year time period where we can't even discuss on the same page, but if we add millions of years, what causes this adaptations and these constant adaptations in their environment to stop occurring? If they don't stop over time, what else is going to happen? You have to, there's going to have to be, you're going to reach a certain point where you split from whatever family you came from. It's that simple. And we've seen bacteria, of course we haven't seen a change in a different type, but we've seen a single to multicellular kind of formation. So we've seen huge changes, and especially where they can take in a different type of vitamin. I believe that was vitamin E. But here, and you make the comment at the end, of course, you will never see a species give birth to another species. That's a simple misconception of evolution. That does not happen. Evolution doesn't pick what it wants to create. The environment, and it's slow, very slow processes, and it's many of them fail once there's, but I think we'll get into that point later because he mentions it, but we'll wait on that. So let's continue.
Natural selection can never extend outside of the DNA limit. DNA cannot be changed into a new species by natural selection. The same process of selective breeding is done with flowers, fruits and vegetables. New variations of the species are possible, but a new species has never been developed by science. In fact, the most modern laboratories are unable to produce a left-hand protein as found in humans and animals. Evolutionists fail to admit that no species has ever been proven to have evolved in any way. If natural selection were true, Eskimos would have fur to keep them warm, but they don't. Humans in the tropics would have silver, reflective skin to help them keep cool, but they don't.
So there's a couple problems with what he says at the beginning. There's one interesting point I want to go over, but kind of. The thing he mentions with natural selection cannot change I think he's trying to mean you can't change a species. It really doesn't give, it cannot change the DNA into forming an organism of another species. So my point is, with natural selection doesn't directly change species. It's just the idea that this the strong enough, I don't want to say the strongest survive, but the strong enough survive. And in that, how do we get to this point is there are random mutations inside the DNA. There is no direct path. It is random. Evolution does not have a direct path. That is a big misconception. So with DNA, we have, these are very small changes, and they don't create huge changes. They're very small, but they happen over time, and a lot of these small changes giving enough time, and there's a huge time gap in which they had this time. So given that time, you get these small changes. Some will kill the animals, some will die off because these changes were for the worse. Some of these will live long enough until they reach a new environment and die. But over and over time, when these small changes, you're going to get... Here's my point. There is no first human. I want people to know that. Some people think that, oh, well, the first human was born. No, the point is, it's kind of like a color scale. And you take all these colors, and there are millions lined up. And each one was a different shade. Could you tell from yellow to orange what is the first one that is orange? No. They're very small, and they happen over a very long period of time. And it's almost indistinguishable to where is that change. So, with that grasp and concept, that's where we get to the point of, okay, so that's where we get to this point. It's not a sudden change. You don't, like you mentioned before, you don't have a dog then a cat. You don't have a monkey then or ape or chimpanzee than a human. It's very slow. We will never be able to tell where the first human originated. These are not huge changes, and natural selection is the process in which we get to that point. It's not what causes us to get to that point. It's the mutations that get us there. So I want that to be understood. And then he brings up, no, I'm not really into the, I've never really researched this topic, but I've heard of it. It's called chirality or something like that. Left-handed proteins and right-handed proteins. And there was this unbalance at the beginning of the origin of life. And I don't think it has anything with abiogenesis, but left-handed proteins are, or life requires them, apparently. And he says that no factory can really produce left-handed proteins. No, that humans have... I don't think that has really anything to do with evolution. And I've heard some creationists say that chirality makes the argument that, you know, life didn't spring up by chance. This is not even directly related to evolution. Abiogenesis and the formation of life is not related to that. And it doesn't matter if the left-handed protein is complex and you can't create it, that does not disprove evolution. So I don't know where he was going with that. So it doesn't matter if we don't understand the left-handed protein and why that imbalance in life exists. That does not disprove evolution. They're not related. Chirality and abiogenesis not related to evolution. It kind of is, but not. So evolution is entirely separate. So if abiogenesis or this theory was proven wrong, does not prove evolution wrong. But this formation of life, if it's so complex, how does that disprove evolution? That's not an argument you can make. That's like saying we don't understand some bits of quantum physics means we don't understand how gravity works. I mean, there's arguments to be made that we don't understand how gravity works, but that's not the point. But then he goes on and says if natural selection existed, then Eskimos would have blue or silver tinted skin, and you know, they would grow fur. Well, that's not how it works. If humans evolved, evolved to a certain point, and then they migrated and they lost all this fur, it doesn't matter. They would have to kind of begin that process again. They would have to regain that fur if they stayed there. It doesn't, in 10,000 years, you're not going to get fur because you're in a cold environment. If someone is born with fur somehow through a random change, and I'm sure that would be very slow, you would slowly gain hair over thousands of years. It does not. It's a huge misconception. It doesn't happen fast. It's slow. So if someone else lost that hair to some other place and migrated up there, well, they don't have the hair anymore and they're in an environment that doesn't suit them. Whatever. It's a huge misconception. And going back to the point of chirality. I don't know where I was going, but either way. Let's move on to the next part. Okay, before I move on to the next part, like I said before, I just stopped the recording. If you were to gain that hair, you would also have to spread your genes. You would have to have offspring that had those same genes and continue. And if they live longer and, you know, and were able to spread their genes more or have more offspring than the person that didn't have hair, then of course more people would have hair, and this would be over a very long time period. It's not just a sudden event, so I wanted to get that out of the way.